Have you ever done something small, something almost instinctive, a quiet act of kindness for a stranger, never expecting to see them again, let alone for it to change your life? We all carry stories within us, tales of paths crossed and unexpected turns. Sometimes, these turns lead us to places we never imagined, all because of a single, simple gesture. If you believe in the gentle power of such moments, in the way compassion can ripple outwards, then stay with us. This one's for you. And hey, before we dive in, if you enjoy stories that warm the heart and remind you of the good in the world, do consider subscribing to our channel and ringing that notification bell. You won't want to miss the moments of magic we share here. Now, let me tell you a story called The Brentwood Barista and the Bel Air Angel. The Los Angeles sun, a relentless golden eye in the vast blue, beat down on Cal Mitchell's shoulders as he guided the vibrating compactor over the stubborn earth. Dust, thick as powdered sugar, coated his worn work boots, caked the creases of his jeans, and settled in a gritty film on his skin. He tasted it with every weary breath. Another day, on another sprawling construction site, in a city that never stopped rebuilding itself, a city of endless contrasts, gleaming towers a stone's throw from encampments of quiet desperation. Cal knew both sides, though he lived firmly in the latter. He was a man built of solid lines and quiet strength, his face a roadmap of sun-weathered skin and too little sleep. His hands, calloused and capable, knew the language of tools and honest labor. They were hands that had once held his wife, Maria, with a tenderness that still ached in their memory. Hands that now tucked his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, into bed each night, smoothing her dark hair and whispering promises of a better tomorrow he fought daily to manifest. Maria had been gone for 3 years, taken by an illness that had swept through their lives like a wildfire, leaving behind a landscape of grief and a mountain of bills that Cal was still chipping away at, one grueling workday at a time. His current state of struggle was a quiet, persistent hum beneath the surface of his days. He was perpetually tired, stretched thin between the demands of his job, the responsibilities of single parenthood, and the gnawing anxiety of making ends meet. Foremen barked, deadlines loomed, and the paychecks, though earned with sweat and strain, always seemed to evaporate too quickly. Yet, through it all, Cal moved with a certain stoic grace. He didn't complain. He simply did what needed to be done, his thoughts often drifting to Lily, her school play, the overdue library book, the way her eyes lit up when he managed to bring home her favorite strawberry yogurt. She was his sun, the one pure, unwavering light in his often gray world. On this particular Friday, the whistle blew, signaling the end of a long week. Relief, heavy and sweet, washed over Cal. He packed his lunchbox, the thermos inside long empty, and trudged towards the site office to clock out. His beat-up pickup truck, a relic from better days, coughed to life with a familiar grumble. The drive home to their small apartment, in a less glamorous part of the city, was usually a time for Cal to shed the skin of the workday, to let the noise of the jackhammers and saws fade, replaced by the anticipation of Lily's bright chatter. But today, a different urge pulled at him. He was bone-tired, yes, but an almost forgotten craving for a decent cup of coffee, something not brewed in the communal pot at the site, tugged him off his usual route. He knew a little place, a small, independent coffee shop called The Daily Grind, tucked away on a side street in a slightly more upscale neighborhood he sometimes passed through. It was an indulgence, one he rarely allowed himself. But the thought of that rich aroma, the brief moment of peace, felt like a necessary balm. The Daily Grind was bustling, a hive of late afternoon activity. Students hunched over laptops, friends chatted animatedly, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and baked goods. Cal, feeling out of place in his dusty work clothes amidst the more polished clientele, stood patiently in line, his gaze drifting. That's when he saw her. She was standing at the counter, her back mostly to him, but he could see the slump of her shoulders, the the way her fingers fumbled in her purse. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a loose-fitting sweater, a baseball cap pulled low over her hair, sunglasses still perched on her head despite being indoors. He heard her voice, a low murmur. Then the barista's slightly louder, more officious tone. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card has been declined." A beat of silence. Cal saw the woman's head dip a little lower. He could almost feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the familiar sting of public embarrassment. He knew that feeling, the sudden, cold dread of being caught short, of a simple transaction turning into a moment of exposure. His own wallet wasn't exactly flush, payday was still a few days off, and what little he had was carefully earmarked. But the sight of her distress, her quiet predicament, stirred something in him, an automatic, unthinking response. She was trying another card now, her movements flustered. I don't understand," she mumbled, her voice barely audible above the cafe's din. "There should be—" Just a moment. The barista, a young man with an air of impatient efficiency, tapped his fingers on the counter. The people behind Cal were shifting, a collective sigh of minor annoyance rippling through the line. Before he'd even fully registered the decision, Cal stepped forward. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his worn leather wallet, and extracted a $10 bill, one of the few he had left for the weekend. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and low, careful not to draw more attention to her. He addressed the barista, placing the bill on the counter. "I'll get her coffee, and whatever she was having with it." He glanced at the pastry she'd gestured towards earlier. "And one of those croissants, please." Then, to her, a gentle nod. "It's all right." The woman turned, startled. Her sunglasses were large, obscuring much of her face, but Cal saw the flicker of surprise, then confusion in the slight parting of her lips. She started to protest. "Oh no, I couldn't. Please, you don't have to." "It's just coffee," Cal said with a small, reassuring smile. "Happens to the best of us. Consider it a random act of caffeine." He kept his tone light, hoping to ease her discomfort. He knew what it was like to need a helping hand, and the awkwardness that sometimes came with accepting it. The barista, processing the new transaction, looked from Cal's dusty, work-stained appearance to the elegantly understated, if flustered, woman, a flicker of surprise in his own eyes. He took Cal's money. "All right, then. One large latte and a chocolate croissant for the lady." "And what can I get for you, sir?" "Just a black coffee, small," Cal said, already feeling the pinch of his impulsive generosity but pushing the thought away. The relief he saw subtly relax the woman's shoulders was worth more than the few dollars. She was still looking at him, a strange expression on her partially hidden face. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now, less strained. "That's incredibly kind." "No problem at all," Cal replied, giving another slight nod before stepping back to let her collect her order. He paid for his own coffee and moved to the side, waiting. He didn't want to make her feel obligated to engage further. It was done. A small thing. She picked up her latte and croissant, then hesitated, turning back to him. I'd like to pay you back, if you'll let me. I'm just a little disorganized today." Cal shook his head. "Don't worry about it. Seriously, enjoy your coffee." He offered another small, genuine smile, then took his own cup and headed for the door. He needed to get home to Lily. The brief pleasure of the anticipated coffee was already tinged with the knowledge that his weekend budget was now even tighter, but the warmth in his chest wasn't just from the cheap brew he held. It was something else, something akin to a quiet satisfaction, the kind that came from easing another's burden, however small. He didn't look back. He simply walked out into the late afternoon sun, the encounter already beginning to fade into the tapestry of his day. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm of work, school runs, and the comfortable chaos of life with an energetic 8-year-old. Cal had all but forgotten the incident at the coffee shop. It was a fleeting moment, a minor blip in the grand scheme of his demanding life. He'd certainly never expected to see the woman again. Los Angeles was a vast, sprawling metropolis, a sea of millions of faces. The chances were infinitesimal. Then, on Monday afternoon, as he was meticulously checking the rebar alignments on a high-rise project downtown, his foreman, a gruff man named Henderson, bellowed his name. "Mitchell! Someone at the gate for you, says it's important." Cal frowned. Important? Who would be looking for him here? His mind immediately jumped to Lily, a familiar knot of parental anxiety tightening in his stomach. Was she okay? Was it the school? He wiped his dusty hands on his jeans and hurried towards the main gate, his heart thumping a nervous rhythm. Standing just outside the chain-link fence, in the incongruous setting of roaring cement mixers and shouting workers, was the woman from the coffee shop. This time, she wasn't wearing sunglasses or a baseball cap. Her hair, a cascade of honey-blonde waves, fell softly around her shoulders. Her face, now fully visible, was striking. Delicate features, intelligent eyes, the color of warm whiskey, and a hesitant smile playing on her lips. She looked out of place, an orchid in a gravel pit. Cal stopped short, recognition dawning, mixed with a considerable amount of surprise. "You," he said, a little breathlessly. "From the coffee shop?" She nodded, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "Yes. Hello again. I know this is unexpected, and probably a strange place to find you." Her gaze took in the organized chaos of the construction site behind him. I hope I'm not interrupting anything vital." No, it's fine," Cal managed, still processing her presence. "How did you find me?" It was a genuine question, tinged with a slight unease. He was a nobody, a construction worker. How and why would she go to the trouble? It took a bit of doing, she admitted, a wry smile touching her lips. "I asked at the coffee shop if anyone knew a construction worker who was a regular. Described you as best I could. One of the other baristas, not the one from that day, said she'd seen you wear a cap with a logo from Apex Construction sometimes. I called their main office, described the situation, very vaguely of course, and mentioned the coffee shop incident, and they said they had a Cal Mitchell working on a downtown site. It was a long shot." She paused, her expression earnest. "I really wanted to thank you properly and pay you back." Cal felt a wave of mingled embarrassment and disbelief. "All that effort for a few dollars?" "You didn't have to do all that," he said, shaking his head. "It was really nothing." That was the truth, as he saw it. He hadn't thought twice about it after leaving the cafe. For him, the memory had been filed away under small kindness, no big deal. He certainly hadn't expected her to track him down like a private investigator. "It wasn't nothing to me," she insisted, her voice soft but firm. Her eyes met his, and there was an intensity in them that made him feel suddenly self-conscious in his dusty, sweat-stained clothes. "You have no idea. I was having a particularly terrible day. More than terrible, actually. And your kindness, your just stepping in like that, without a word, without making a fuss, it was like a little light in a very dark room." Cal shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to such direct expressions of gratitude, especially from a stranger who looked like she'd just stepped out of a magazine, even in her casual attire. "Well, I'm glad I could help then," he said, meaning it. If his small gesture had made a difference, then it was worth far more than the price of a latte. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, elegant envelope. "Please," she said, holding it out to him. "This is for the coffee, and for your trouble." Cal hesitated. "Really, it's not necessary." "Please," she repeated, her gaze unwavering. "It would make me feel better." Reluctantly, he took the envelope. It felt too formal, too much. "Thank you," he mumbled, not sure what else to say. He was intensely aware of Henderson watching them from a distance, his bushy eyebrows raised in curiosity. There was a pause, a moment of unexpected stillness amidst the clatter of the construction site. She looked at him, then seemed to come to a decision. "My name is Serafina Moon," she said, extending her hand. Cal's mind blanked for a second. Serafina Moon. The name echoed, plucking a chord of vague familiarity, like a half-remembered song lyric. He took her offered hand. Hers was soft, a stark contrast to his own rough palm. "Cal Mitchell," he replied. "Pleasure to meet you, Serafina." As the name settled, the pieces began to click into place with a startling jolt. Serafina Moon. Not just a Serafina Moon. The Serafina Moon. The actress. The one whose face had graced countless magazine covers, whose films had broken box office records, whose private life was often splashed across tabloids with lurid speculation. He'd seen her movies, of course, usually with Maria, back when life was simpler, when a trip to the cinema was a regular treat. He remembered her eyes, captivating on the big screen, the same whiskey-colored eyes that were now looking at him with genuine warmth. A wave of stunned silence washed over Cal. He must have looked utterly dumbfounded because a small, almost apologetic smile touched her lips. "Yes," she said quietly, as if confirming his unspoken realization. "That's Serafina Moon. I've been laying low for a while, personal reasons. A bit of a crisis, you could say." Her smile wavered slightly. "Trying to be invisible for a bit. Clearly, I'm not very good at it. If my credit cards stop working." Cal could only stare. The woman he'd bought coffee for, the woman whose minor embarrassment he'd tried to alleviate, was one of the most famous people on the planet. The irony was staggering. He, Cal Mitchell, dust-covered construction worker and struggling single dad, had performed a random act of kindness for a bona fide movie star. The world suddenly felt a little tilted on its axis. He thought of the $10 bill, his carefully hoarded cash for the weekend, and a hysterical laugh almost escaped him. Serafina seemed to sense his shock. "Look, I know this is probably a lot to take in," she said, her voice still gentle. "And I didn't mean to ambush you at your workplace. But there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. If you have a few minutes. Something more than just repaying you for coffee." Cal, still reeling, could only nod dumbly. His foreman, Henderson, was now overtly staring, his jaw practically on the ground. The construction noise around them seemed to fade into a dull roar. Serafina Moon wanted to talk to him. About what? He couldn't possibly imagine. His life had just taken a very, very strange turn. Cal found himself seated across from Serafina Moon in a quiet, discreet alcove of a nearby upscale cafe, a world away from the daily grind and even further from the grit of the construction site. He had hastily washed his hands and face in the site's rudimentary washroom, acutely aware of his work clothes, the scent of dust and honest labor clinging to him. Serafina, however, seemed entirely unfazed, her focus solely on him. The envelope she'd given him lay untouched on the small table between them. He hadn't even thought to open it. His mind was still trying to reconcile the woman from the coffee shop with the global celebrity. He took a slow sip of the water the waitress had brought. "So," he began, feeling the need to break the silence. "You're Serafina Moon." He said it slowly, as if testing the reality of the words. "I've, seen your movies. You're very talented." It sounded lame, even to his own ears, but his brain was still buffering. A genuine smile lit her face, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, Cal. That's kind of you to say." She paused, then leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. "About that day at the coffee shop, I know you said it was nothing, but I need you to understand why it meant so much to me, why I went to the trouble of finding you." Cal listened, his initial shock slowly giving way to curiosity. He thought back to his own small act, He'd been on autopilot, really. Saw someone in a bind, helped them out. It was how he was raised, how he tried to live, especially with Lily watching. Simple. He recalled his own difficult circumstances at that time, the constant low-level stress about money, the weariness that settled deep in his bones after a long week. That $10 bill had been more significant to his weekend than he'd let on. Yet, the impulse to help had overridden his own needs without a second thought. He didn't see it as a grand gesture, just a human one. Serafina's voice was low, her gaze fixed on her clasped hands for a moment before she looked up at him. "I've been going through a very public and very painful upheaval in my personal life," she began, her voice tinged with a vulnerability that felt startlingly real, far removed from any on-screen persona. Betrayals, loss, the kind of things that make you question everything, including your own judgment. The press has been relentless, and I needed to disappear, to try and find some quiet, some normalcy. She took a breath. That morning, before I went for that coffee, I'd had another barrage of awful news. My bank had put a hold on my accounts due to some legal entanglements orchestrated by people I once trusted. So, the declined card wasn't just an embarrassing blip, it was another signal that my life was spiraling out of my control, even in the smallest ways. I felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone, even in a crowded cafe. I was at a real low point, Cal, lower than most people could imagine, despite all the perceived glamour. Her eyes, when they met his again, were shadowed with remembered pain. And then you stepped in, a complete stranger. You didn't stare, you didn't judge, you just helped quietly, kindly. You didn't make a show of it. You treated me like a person, not a problem or a curiosity. In that moment, your simple, unassuming kindness was profound. It was a reminder that there's still good in the world, that human decency exists, even when you feel like you're drowning in the opposite. Cal felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't considered any of that. He'd just seen a woman in a bit of a jam. To hear that his small act had landed with such impact at such a critical time for her was humbling. I'm sorry you're going through such a tough time," he said, his voice sincere. "No one deserves that." "Thank you," she said softly. "Which brings me to why I really wanted to see you again. This isn't just about repaying you for a coffee, Cal. This is perhaps a long shot, and you're perfectly entitled to say no or to think I'm crazy." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "As I said, I'm trying to keep a very low profile. I've let go of most of my usual staff, security, drivers. I can't trust many people right now. But I still need to get around. Discreetly, safely, and frankly, I'm tired of feeling like a target, or like everyone around me has an agenda." She looked directly at him, her gaze steady and searching. "What I saw in you at that coffee shop, Cal, wasn't just kindness. It was discretion, integrity. You didn't ask questions. You didn't pry. You didn't even seem to recognize me, which, frankly, was a relief at the time. You just acted like a decent human being, and I've been thinking, I need someone I can trust, someone reliable, someone who isn't part of that world." She took another breath. "I want to offer you a job, Cal, as my personal driver. It would involve driving me where I need to go, sometimes on short notice. It would require absolute discretion. The pay would be significantly better than what I imagine you're making now, and the hours, while sometimes unpredictable, might offer you more flexibility in the long run. I know it's out of the blue and completely unrelated to your current profession, but I have a strong gut feeling about this." "About you?" Cal stared at her, utterly floored. "A driver? For Serafina Moon?" The idea was so far outside the realm of his reality that it felt like a scene from one of her movies. He, who wrestled with rebar and concrete, now being asked to navigate the polished streets of Los Angeles in a luxury vehicle, chauffeuring a film star. The contrast was almost comical. His first instinct was a wave of self-doubt. "Serafina, I'm a construction worker," he stammered, gesturing to himself as if the dust on his clothes was evidence enough of his unsuitability. "I don't know anything about being a personal driver for someone like you. I mean, I have a clean driving record, always have, but this is a whole different league. What if I'm not what you need?" He thought of his old pickup truck, its loyal but wheezing engine. He pictured the sleek, silent cars that people like her usually traveled in. "I'm not looking for a chauffeur with decades of experience driving celebrities, Cal," she said gently. "I'm looking for a good person, a trustworthy person. Someone who won't sell stories to the tabloids, who won't gossip, who will just be there. Reliably. The driving part, I'm sure you can handle. It's the other qualities, the ones you've already shown me, that are rare and invaluable." She saw the hesitation still clouding his face. "Think about it, please. No pressure. But an opportunity like this, for both of us perhaps, it feels like it's meant to be. Doesn't it? After how we met?" He thought of Lily. The relentless financial pressure, the exhaustion that was his constant companion. This offer, if it was real, if he could actually do it, could change everything for them. More time with Lily, less worry about bills. It was a dizzying prospect, but the fear of the unknown, of stepping into a world so alien to his own, was a powerful counterweight. What if he failed? What if he let her down? He was used to tangible work, to building things with his hands. This was different. It was about trust, discretion, navigating the complex world of a celebrity in crisis. I need some time to think," he said finally, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," Serafina said, her understanding immediate. "Take all the time you need. Here's my personal number." She wrote it down on a napkin from the table. "Call me when you've had a chance to consider it. And Cal?" He looked up. "Whatever you decide, thank you again. For everything, Port." He left the cafe a little while later, Serafina's phone number feeling like a talisman in his pocket, the untouched envelope still with him. The Los Angeles traffic seemed muted, the usual urban cacophony distant, as his mind raced. A famous actress had just offered him a job based on an act of kindness that had cost him $10 he could barely spare. It was surreal. It was terrifying. It was, just maybe, the second chance he hadn't even known he was looking for. Cal drove home in a daze, the weight of Serafina Moon's offer pressing down on him. Yet paradoxically, a sliver of something like hope was trying to push its way through the dense clouds of his usual worries. He parked his truck, the familiar groan of the emergency brake, a grounding sound in the midst of his mental turmoil. He needed to talk to Lily. Not about the celebrity aspect. He wasn't even sure how to explain that, but about the possibility of a new job, a different life for them. Lily was at the small kitchen table, diligently working on her homework, her tongue poked out in concentration as she drew a remarkably lopsided giraffe. Her dark hair, so like Maria's, was pulled back in a ponytail, and her small face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy, you're home." He scooped her into a hug, burying his face in her hair, the scent of her kid shampoo a comfort. "Hey, Munchkin, how was school?" "It was good. We learned about caterpillars turning into butterflies." She chirped, then looked at him, her brow furrowing with a child's unerring perception. "Daddy, you look funny, like when you can't find your keys but you're also thinking about ice cream." Cal chuckled, a genuine laugh that eased some of the tension in his chest. "Something like that, sweetie." He sat down beside her, pushing aside the envelope from Serafina, which he'd placed on the counter. He needed to approach this carefully. "Lily, what if Daddy got a new job? A different kind of job?" Her eyes widened. "A new job? Like, not building things anymore?" "Maybe not building with tools, no," he said. "It would be driving for a lady, helping her get to places she needs to go." "Driving? Like a race car driver?" Lily's imagination immediately took flight. "Not quite that exciting," Cal smiled. "More like making sure she gets there safely and on time. It might mean I'm home more, or at least not so tired all the time." That was the crux of it, the part that resonated deepest. Lily considered this, tapping her pencil against her chin. "Would this lady be nice?" "I think so, yes," Cal said, thinking of Serafina's gentle voice, her earnest gratitude. "I think she's been having a hard time, and she needs someone kind to help her." "Like when Mrs. Rodriguez sprained her ankle and you carried her groceries up the stairs?" Lily asked. "Exactly like that, sweetie," Cal affirmed, his heart swelling. His daughter, his moral compass. Just a different kind of help. He took a deep breath. "It's a big change, and I'm a little scared, to be honest. It's all very new." Lily reached out and patted his arm, her small hand surprisingly firm. "You can do it, Daddy. You're the bestest driver. And you're always kind. The lady will be lucky to have you." Her simple, unwavering faith was like a balm to his frayed nerves. He looked at her bright, hopeful face, and the fear began to recede, replaced by a tentative resolve. Maybe he could do this. For Lily. For himself. For a chance at something better. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Cal sat alone in the quiet living room, the envelope from Serafina in his hand. He finally opened it. Inside was $200 and a small handwritten note. "For the coffee, and for restoring a little of my faith in humanity. Thank you, Cal. S. $200 for a $10 gesture." It felt like too much, and yet it was a tangible symbol of the strange new path that had opened before him. He picked up his phone, Serafina's number still on the napkin beside him. His fingers hovered over the keypad. This was it. Stepping off the familiar, worn path into something unknown. He thought of Lily's words. "You can do it, Daddy." With a deep breath, he dialed. Serafina answered on the third ring, her voice calm and welcoming. "Cal? Is that you?" "Yes, Serafina, it's me," he said, his own voice steadier than he expected. "I've thought about your offer, and I'd like to accept." A soft exhale on the other end of the line. "Oh, Cal, that's wonderful news. I'm so glad." And so began Cal's new life. The transition was, predictably, surreal. One day he was wrestling with rebar, the next he was standing in the pristine, climate-controlled garage of Serafina Moon's secluded Bel Air mansion, a sleek, dark sedan, gleaming under the recessed lights. The car itself was a marvel of engineering, silent and powerful, a far cry from his rumbling pickup. Serafina's estate manager, a discreet and efficient woman named Mrs. Albright, gave him a tour of the vehicle, explaining its various features with polite professionalism. His first few days were a mix of trepidation and quiet focus. He learned Serafina's preferred routes, the quiet side streets that avoided the worst of LA's notorious traffic, the discreet entrances to the few places she frequented, a private therapist's office, a secluded yoga studio, the occasional hush-hush meeting with her legal team. He was always punctual, his demeanor calm and unobtrusive. He opened doors, handled her few bags, and mostly, he listened. Serafina herself was initially reserved during their drives. her face often hidden behind sunglasses, her words few. Cal respected her silence, understanding her need for a sanctuary, even a moving one. He focused on providing a smooth, stress-free ride, a pocket of calm in her turbulent world. He learned to anticipate her needs, a bottle of water ready, the temperature in the car just so. He was, by nature, observant and considerate, skills honed by years of caring for Maria and then Lily. Slowly, tentatively, the silences began to fill. It started with small things. Serafina might comment on a song playing softly on the radio, or ask Cal about his day, his daughter. He, in turn, would answer honestly but concisely, never prying, never overstepping. He told her about Lily's school play, her love for drawing, her funny observations about the world. He spoke of his late wife, Maria, not with overwhelming grief, but with a quiet, enduring affection, sharing small, warm memories. Serafina listened, truly listened. He could see it in the way she turned slightly in her seat, her gaze sometimes resting on him in the rearview mirror, thoughtful and unreadable. One afternoon, after he'd recounted a particularly amusing anecdote about Lily trying to teach their old cat to fetch, a genuine melodic laugh escaped Serafina. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh so freely, and it felt like a small breakthrough, a tiny flower blooming in a carefully guarded garden. "Lily sounds wonderful, Cal," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You're a good father." "I try my best," Cal replied, a warmth spreading through him at her simple, sincere words. "She's my world." In turn, Serafina began to share fragments of her own life, not the scandalous headlines, but the quieter, more personal truths. She spoke of the suffocating pressures of fame, the loneliness that often accompanied it, the difficulty of knowing who to trust when everyone seemed to want something from her. She talked about her passion for acting, a love that had been overshadowed by the toxic circus her life had become. She never delved too deeply into the specifics of her personal crisis, but Cal pieced together a story of profound betrayal by those closest to her, people who had managed her career and her finances, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. "Sometimes," she confided one rainy afternoon, as the windshield wipers swept a hypnotic rhythm, "I dream of just walking away from it all. Living in a small town, opening a bookstore, something simple, something real." "There's a lot to be said for simple and real," Cal agreed quietly, thinking of his own unglamorous but grounded existence. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He just listened, providing a safe space for her to voice her fears and frustrations. He understood, perhaps better than most, the yearning for peace, for a life less complicated. He demonstrated his competence not through grand gestures, but through consistent reliability and quiet integrity. When a particularly aggressive paparazzo tried to corner them, leaving a private clinic, Cal navigated the situation with calm professionalism, maneuvering the car expertly and shielding Serafina from the worst of the flashing cameras without drawing attention or escalating the situation. He didn't engage, didn't react. He simply did his job with quiet efficiency. Serafina, visibly shaken by the encounter, had squeezed his arm briefly afterwards. "Thank you, Cal," she'd whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You handled that perfectly." He also proved his trustworthiness. Opportunities arose, as they inevitably would in his position, where a less scrupulous person might have been tempted. A discarded schedule, a snippet of a sensitive phone call overheard, these were currency in the world of celebrity gossip. But Cal's moral compass was fixed. Serafina's privacy was paramount. He was her driver, yes, but he also felt like her protector, in a quiet, unassuming way. Mrs. Albright, initially watchful and reserved, began to treat him with a growing respect, her nods becoming warmer, her instructions less overtly cautious. She saw, as Serafina did, that Cal Mitchell was a man of his word, a rare commodity in their world. The change in Cal was noticeable to the person who mattered most. Lily. He was home more often now, not always physically present for dinner due to Serafina's unpredictable schedule, but his overall presence in Lily's life was more engaged, less burdened by bone-deep weariness. He had more energy for her stories, for helping with homework, for their weekend trips to the park. He smiled more easily, the lines of worry around his eyes seeming to soften. "Daddy," Lily said one evening as he was tucking her into bed, "you seem happier. Is it the new lady? Is she nice to you?" Cal smoothed her hair. "Yes, Munchkin. The new job is good. And yes, Miss Serafina, she's very kind. And I think I'm helping her. And that feels good. Like you helped the lady at the coffee shop." Lily's eyes were wide with understanding. "Exactly like that," Cal affirmed, a lump in his throat. He hadn't told Lily the full story of who Serafina was, just that she was his new boss and needed help. But Lily, with her child's wisdom, had grasped the essential truth. The deepening connection between Cal and Serafina wasn't overtly romantic, not in the conventional sense. It was something quieter, more profound, a bond forged in shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and the unexpected sanctuary they found in each other's company. For Serafina, Cal represented stability, normalcy, and an unshakable integrity that was a balm to her wounded spirit. For Cal, Serafina, despite her fame and her troubles, was simply a person in need of kindness and support, and helping her gave him a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that he was making a difference beyond just earning a paycheck. Their drives became less about transportation and more about connection, two souls from vastly different worlds finding common ground on the winding roads of Los Angeles, and within the quiet confines of a shared journey. The delicate equilibrium of their new arrangement, however, was inevitably tested. Serafina's attempts to remain entirely incognito were, in a city as celebrity-obsessed as Los Angeles, a fragile enterprise. The paparazzi, like persistent hounds, were always sniffing for a trail, a hint of her whereabouts. The personal crisis that had driven her into seclusion involved a messy legal battle with a former manager, a man named Julian Vance, who was known for his vindictive nature and his skill at manipulating the press. One late afternoon, after a particularly draining meeting with her lawyers, Serafina was unusually quiet on the drive back to her estate. Cal sensed her distress, the air in the car thick with unspoken anxieties. As they turned onto the long, tree-lined driveway leading to her home, they were suddenly ambushed. A pack of photographers, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, swarmed the car, their cameras flashing like a barrage of lightning strikes. Their shouts a chaotic chorus. "Serafina, is it true about the settlement? Are you hiding assets, Miss Moon? Who's the new mystery man, Serafina?" This last question was accompanied by several lenses aimed directly at Cal. Cal reacted instantly, his protective instincts kicking in. He kept the car moving slowly but steadily, his face impassive, his focus entirely on getting Serafina safely inside the gates. He didn't honk, didn't shout, didn't make any sudden moves that could be misconstrued or used against them. He was a rock of calm in the swirling chaos. Serafina, beside him, had flinched at the initial onslaught, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a familiar hunted look. They made it through the gates, which closed swiftly behind them, shutting out the clamor. But the damage was done. The next morning, photos of them were plastered across several online gossip sites. Cal, identified only as Serafina's burly new driver, was depicted as a shadowy figure, the implication in some of the more salacious articles being that he was more than just an employee. Worse, details from Serafina's confidential legal meeting, details only a handful of people were privy to, were leaked alongside the photos, clearly designed to damage her case against Julian Vance. The atmosphere in Serafina's home that morning was fraught with tension. Mrs. Albright was grim-faced, her usual composure strained. Serafina's lawyer was on a furious phone call in another room. Serafina herself looked pale and defeated, pacing her spacious living room like a caged animal. Cal stood by quietly, feeling a heavy weight of guilt, even though he knew he'd done nothing wrong. His presence, his image, was now part of her problem. "They must have been tipped off about the meeting," Serafina said, her voice tight with anger and despair. "And someone inside is leaking information to Vance. It has to be." Her eyes, usually so warm, were filled with suspicion as they swept the room, briefly, painfully, even resting on Cal. It was a fleeting moment, that flicker of doubt in her eyes, but it hit Cal like a physical blow. He understood. In her world, trust was a fragile commodity, easily broken. He, the newcomer, the outsider, was an obvious variable. Later that day, Serafina's security consultant, a stern, no-nonsense man named Marcus Thorne, arrived to investigate the leak and the paparazzi ambush. He interviewed everyone, including Cal. Thorne's questions were pointed, his demeanor professional but skeptical. He asked Cal about his background, his movements, his communications. Cal answered everything truthfully and calmly, but he could feel the undercurrent of suspicion. He was the unknown factor, the man who had appeared out of nowhere. That evening, Serafina asked to speak with him alone. She looked exhausted, the strain of the day etched on her face. "Cal," she began, her voice weary. "Mr. Thorne has some concerns about how quickly you became part of my inner circle, about your lack of professional vetting compared to my usual staff." Cal's heart sank. This was it. She was going to let him go. He couldn't blame her. He was a risk she didn't need. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice betraying none of the disappointment churning inside him. "If you think it's best for me to leave, I'll go. No hard feelings. I just want you to be safe and okay." Serafina looked at him, really looked at him, her gaze searching his face. The silence stretched, filled only with the distant hum of the city. Then she did something unexpected. She shook her head, a small, decisive movement. "No," she said, her voice regaining some of its strength. "No, Cal. I don't believe for a second that you had anything to do with this. Thorne is just doing his job, looking at every angle, but I trust you." She took a shaky breath. "My gut feeling about you from that very first day at the coffee shop, it hasn't changed. You are a good man, Cal Mitchell, one of the few I've met in a very long time. And I'm not going to let paranoia and suspicion drive away someone who has shown me nothing but kindness and integrity." Relief, so potent it almost buckled his knees, washed over Cal. Her faith in him, in the face of everything, was a profound affirmation. "Thank you, Serafina," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." "What I do know," she continued, a new resolve hardening her eyes, "is that Julian Vance is playing dirty, trying to rattle me, trying to isolate me. And someone on my team, someone I thought I could trust, is helping him." Her gaze sharpened. "And we are going to find out who." In the days that followed, Serafina, with Cal's quiet support, initiated her own discreet investigation. Thorne, though initially skeptical of Cal, began to observe his unwavering professionalism, his quiet loyalty to Serafina. He saw how Cal anticipated her needs, how he remained calm under pressure, how his presence seemed to have a grounding effect on the often stressed actress. The truth, when it emerged, was both mundane and insidious. The leak hadn't come from a dramatic betrayal by a long-trusted confidant, but from a junior assistant in her lawyer's office, someone with gambling debts, who had been bribed by an operative working for Julian Vance. The assistant had access to schedules and confidential documents, and had also tipped off the paparazzi about Serafina's movements. It was a grubby, commonplace treachery, but it had caused significant damage. The resolution of this conflict was swift. The assistant was fired and faced legal repercussions. Security protocols were tightened. But more importantly, Cal's name was completely cleared, his integrity vindicated not just in Serafina's eyes, but in the eyes of her small, trusted team, including the initially skeptical Mr. Thorne and the ever-watchful Mrs. Albright. The incident, though stressful, served to solidify Cal's position. He wasn't just the driver anymore. He was a trusted ally, a steady presence in Serafina's turbulent life. The respect he received from her team was no longer polite and professional. It was genuine, earned through his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. Colleagues who had initially kept a polite distance now greeted him with warmth, sometimes seeking his calm perspective on minor logistical issues. He had become an integral, if unassuming, part of Serafina's support system. Serafina, for her part, seemed to draw strength from his steadfastness. "You were right, Cal," she said to him one evening as they drove away from another tense meeting, the city lights blurring past them. "There is still good in the world. You reminded me of that when I desperately needed to believe it, and you keep reminding me." Cal simply nodded, a comfortable silence settling between them. He didn't need praise. Her trust, her renewed sense of security, was reward enough. He had faced a trial, not of physical strength, but of character, and he had emerged with his integrity intact, his bond with Serafina deepened by the shared adversity. His quiet heroism, the kind that seeks no spotlight, had once again proven its worth, not just to Serafina, but perhaps even a little to himself. He was more than just a construction worker, more than just a driver. He was a man who could be counted on, a man of quiet, unwavering principle. And in the complex, often deceptive world he now inhabited, that was a currency beyond measure. The aftermath of the leak investigation and Cal's quiet vindication brought a subtle but significant shift in the dynamic between him and Serafina. The crucible of shared adversity had burned away any lingering formality, forging a bond that felt less like employer-employee and more like true confidant, partners in navigating the choppy waters of her life. Their conversations during drives deepened, meandering through personal histories, dreams, and quiet philosophies. One cool autumn evening, Cal drove Serafina to a small private charity event she reluctantly agreed to attend. She was nervous, as it was one of her first semi-public appearances since her troubles began. As he helped her from the car, she paused, her hand resting on his arm a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for being here, Cal," she said, her voice soft. "Knowing you're waiting, it makes this easier." Later that night, on the drive home, she was quieter, more reflective. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small velvet-wrapped box. "I wanted to give you something," she said, turning to him as he idled at a red light. "For Lily." Cal looked surprised. "Serafina, you really don't have to." "I know, but I want to." She pressed the box into his hand. "It's just a little something. She sounds like such a special girl." Later, back in his own small apartment, after Lily was asleep, Cal opened the box. Nestled inside was a delicate silver locket, shaped like a butterfly. It was simple, elegant, and exquisitely crafted. Engraved on the back were the tiny initials LM and a single, almost microscopic word, hope. A lump formed in Cal's throat. It was such a thoughtful, personal gesture. Serafina hadn't just bought a generic gift. She'd chosen something that resonated with what he'd told her about Lily, her love for butterflies, her bright spirit. The next time he saw Serafina, he tried to express his gratitude, but words felt inadequate. "She loved it, Serafina. Absolutely loved it. She hasn't taken it off." Serafina smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "I'm so glad. She reminds me of the importance of holding on to hope, even when things seem dark." It was a quiet admission, a glimpse into her own ongoing struggle, and a testament to the small, bright spark Lily represented, even indirectly, in her life. A few weeks later, it was Cal who offered a symbolic gesture, though he didn't initially intend it as such. He'd been clearing out some old boxes, a task he'd put off since Maria passed. He found a small, unassuming envelope containing a letter Maria had written to him on their 5th anniversary. It wasn't long or overly sentimental, but it was full of her love, her humor, her unwavering belief in him, even during times when he doubted himself. Reading it again brought a familiar ache, but also a profound sense of peace and gratitude for the love they had shared. He happened to have the letter in his jacket pocket one afternoon when he was driving Serafina to a particularly stressful legal consultation. She was anxious, her fingers twisting in her lap. Sensing her distress and acting on an instinct he couldn't quite explain, Cal said, "Serafina, I found something the other day. It's a letter from my late wife, Maria. Sometimes, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I forget what's important, I read it. It helps ground me." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I don't know why I'm telling you this or why I have it with me, but would you like to read it? Maybe it's not appropriate, but—" Serafina looked at him, surprised by his offer, by the vulnerability in his eyes. "Cal, are you sure? That's incredibly personal." "I know," he said quietly, "but you've shared so much with me, and honestly, Maria was the kindest, strongest person I knew. Maybe some of her words could offer you a little peace, too." She reached out slowly and took the slightly worn envelope. As Cal drove, she carefully unfolded the letter and read it. Cal didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on the road, giving her space. He could hear her soft breath, the occasional rustle of the paper. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "Cal, this is beautiful. She loved you so much, and she saw you so clearly." Serafina folded the letter carefully, handing it back to him. "Thank you for sharing that with me. It's one of the kindest, most trusting things anyone has ever done for me." Her eyes, when they met his in the rearview mirror, were luminous. "It did help. It reminded me what real love, real partnership looks like. That shared moment, the exchange of such personal tokens, a locket symbolizing hope for his daughter, a letter embodying enduring love from his past, transcended their professional relationship. It was an explicit acknowledgement of the deep, unconventional friendship that had grown between them. The lines of their professional arrangement began to blur in other, gentle ways. One evening, after a long day that had stretched late, Serafina didn't ask to be taken straight home. Instead, she said, "Cal, are you hungry? I know a little Italian place. Very quiet. No one would recognize me there. My treat. If you're not in a hurry to get home." It wasn't a command, but an invitation, clearly personal. Cal thought of Lily, already asleep at home under the watchful eye of their kind elderly neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, who often helped out. "I'd like that very much, Serafina," he replied, a warmth spreading through him. The dinner was simple, unpretentious. They talked not as celebrity and driver, but as two people sharing a meal, discussing books they'd read, funny childhood memories, their quiet hopes for the future. Serafina spoke about a script she'd been sent. A small independent film with a challenging role, something that truly excited her artistically, a departure from the blockbusters she was known for. "I'm thinking of doing it," she said, her eyes sparkling with a passion Cal hadn't seen before. "It feels right, like something I need to do for myself." "You should," Cal encouraged her. "If it makes you feel that way, then it's the right path." As they talked, a shared vision for the future began to subtly emerge. Serafina was slowly, carefully, considering re-engaging with her career, but on her own terms. She spoke of wanting to use her platform for something more meaningful, perhaps starting a foundation for artists struggling with mental health issues, a cause close to her heart given her own experiences. Cal, listening, found himself thinking beyond just driving her. He saw her renewed purpose, and he felt a quiet desire to support her in these new endeavors, not just as an employee, but as a friend who believed in her. Their connection deepened in moments of quiet intimacy too. Sometimes, on long drives back from draining appointments, words weren't necessary. A comfortable silence would settle in the car, filled only with the hum of the engine and the soft sounds of the city. He'd glance in the rear-view mirror and see her looking out the window, a thoughtful, peaceful expression on her face. The tension that usually lined her brow eased. Sometimes, if a particularly moving piece of classical music played on the radio, a shared love they'd discovered, their eyes might meet in the mirror, a flicker of mutual understanding passing between them. One evening, after a particularly harrowing day of depositions for her legal case, Serafina was visibly trembling as she got into the car. Cal, without a word, reached into the glove compartment where he now kept a small, soft blanket, knowing she sometimes got cold when she was stressed. He passed it back to her. She took it, her cold fingers brushing his, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Thank you, Cal," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Later, as they pulled up to her house, she hesitated before getting out. Then she leaned over, and in a gesture that felt both spontaneous and profoundly significant, gently squeezed his hand where it rested on the steering wheel. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, her eyes meeting his, full of gratitude and a deep, quiet affection. The touch was brief, a fleeting connection, but it resonated with unspoken emotion. It wasn't the prelude to a Hollywood romance, but something perhaps rarer and more precious. A testament to a profound human connection forged in unexpected circumstances, a partnership built on trust, kindness, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we don't have to make alone. Cal simply nodded, his own heart full. He was no longer just Cal Mitchell, the struggling construction worker. He was Cal Mitchell, a man who had found purpose, friendship, and a quiet dignity in helping a star find her way back to the light, and in doing so, had found his own path transformed. Months turned into a year, then nearly 2. The rhythms of Cal's life had found a new, steadier beat. The financial anxieties that had once been a constant hum beneath the surface of his days had receded, replaced by a quiet security. He'd been able to move with Lily into a slightly larger, sunnier apartment in a safer neighborhood with better schools. He had more time for her, more energy. The lines of exhaustion that had been etched so deeply around his eyes had softened. He was still Cal, the humble, hard-working man, but there was a new lightness about him, a quiet confidence that came from knowing his worth and seeing the tangible, positive impact he was having. Serafina, too, had undergone a transformation. With Cal's steadfast, unobtrusive support, she had navigated the treacherous waters of her legal battles, emerging bruised but not broken. She had won her case against Julian Vance, exposing his deceit and reclaiming control of her career and finances. She had, as she'd hoped, taken on the challenging role in the small independent film, and her performance was already generating quiet Oscar buzz, hailed by critics as a stunning return to form, raw and powerful. More importantly, she had rediscovered her love for her craft, and a sense of peace that had long eluded her. The culmination of this period of healing and growth was marked by the premiere of that film. It was a significant night for Serafina, a public re-emergence not as a tabloid figure, but as a respected artist. Cal drove her to the theater, the streets lined with flashing cameras and cheering fans. This time, however, the atmosphere felt different, less predatory, more celebratory. Serafina, radiant in a simple but elegant gown, was nervous but composed. As she stepped out of the car, she turned to Cal, her eyes shining. "Wish me luck," she whispered. "You don't need luck, Serafina," Cal said. his voice warm with pride. "You're amazing. Just be you." He gave her a small, reassuring nod. He wasn't just her driver tonight. He felt like a steadfast friend, witnessing a triumph he knew was hard-earned. He watched as she walked the red carpet, poised and graceful, a genuine smile lighting her face. He felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a quiet joy in her success, knowing in some small way he had helped her reach this moment. He wasn't in the spotlight with her, nor did he want to be. His role was in the quiet support that helped her shine. Later that evening, at the subdued after-party held in a private restaurant, Serafina sought him out. He was standing discreetly near the entrance, ready for whenever she needed to leave. She threaded her arm through his. "Come on," she said. "You're not just staff tonight, Cal. You're my friend, my rock. I want you to meet some people." She introduced him to the film's director, to her co-stars, not as my driver, but as my dear friend, Cal Mitchell. He shook hands, murmured polite greetings, feeling a little out of his depth, but also deeply touched by her public acknowledgement of their bond. He saw the respect in their eyes, not just for her, but by extension, for the man she clearly valued so highly. It was a quiet, public affirmation of his place in her life, a recognition of the journey they had undertaken together. Cal was no longer defined by his past struggles. He was confident, fulfilled, his inherent kindness and integrity, now the cornerstones of a life that felt purposeful and secure. He looked forward with optimism, not just for himself and Lily, but for Serafina too. He saw her newfound strength, her renewed passion, and he knew she was on a path to even greater things, both professionally and personally. Their relationship, that unexpected bond forged over a cup of coffee and nurtured through shared vulnerabilities and quiet acts of support, had solidified into something deep and enduring. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, though a profound love and affection existed between them, the love of true friendship, of chosen family. They were partners, in a sense, navigating life's complexities with mutual respect and unwavering support. One sunny Saturday morning, a few weeks after the premiere, Serafina came by Cal's apartment. Not in the sleek sedan, but driving herself in a modest SUV, dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt. Lily, who adored Serafina, or Sera, as she was allowed to call her, shrieked with delight and launched herself into her arms for a hug. "I was thinking," Serafina said, after Lily had shown off her latest drawing, a portrait of Cal, Serafina, and Lily holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. "There's a piece of land I'm looking at up the coast. Quiet, by the ocean. I'm thinking of building a small sanctuary there, a retreat for artists, a place for healing and creativity." Her eyes met Cal's. "I'll need someone to oversee the project. Someone I trust, implicitly. Someone with a good head for building things, and an even better heart for understanding people." Cal looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. From construction worker to driver, and now, potentially, to something even more. It was another unexpected turn, another door opening. "Are you offering me another job, Serafina?" he asked, a teasing glint in his eye. "I'm offering you a partnership, Cal," she replied, her voice earnest. "If you're interested, we could build something beautiful together, something lasting." He looked at Lily, her face bright with excitement at the prospect of beach trips and new adventures. He looked at Serafina, his friend, her eyes full of hope and trust. His life, once a daily struggle for survival, now felt expansive, full of possibility. The quiet act of kindness in a coffee shop had rippled outwards, touching and transforming not just his life and Serafina's, but now, potentially, the lives of many others. "I think," Cal said, his heart full, "that sounds like a wonderful plan." And so, they stood on the precipice of a new beginning, their journey a testament to the enduring power of human connection, the profound impact of kindness, and the beautiful, unexpected ways second chances can reshape our worlds. The future was unwritten, but it was filled with a gentle, hopeful light. Isn't it remarkable how a single, seemingly small moment can set in motion a cascade of events that changes lives forever? Cal and Serafina's story is a quiet reminder that the goodness we put out into the world often finds its way back to us, sometimes in the most unexpected and wonderful of ways. It speaks to the quiet miracles that unfold when we open our hearts to one another, when we choose compassion over indifference. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, for letting us share this story with you. Your presence here, listening, sharing in these moments, it truly means more than you know. We love hearing from our community, so feel free to share in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel and connect us all. If this story touched your heart, if it resonated with you, please do consider subscribing and turning on those notifications. We believe in the power of stories to uplift and inspire, and there's always another one waiting to be told, another moment of quiet magic to share. Until next time, may you look for the opportunities to offer your own small kindnesses, and may you always be open to the unexpected blessings they might bring. Take care and believe in the good.